Welcome to the Mixed Race Belonging podcast, where we explore the intersection of mixed identity and belonging through the lens of somatics and personal and collective liberation to help you heal your belonging wounds and reconnect with your innate wholeness through relationships, new experiences, and activism. I'm your host, Raina-bow, an embodiment coach for mixed race people with a background as a trauma therapist, yoga teacher, and health educator. The tools and insights I share with you here are the approach that has not only helped me heal my belonging wound, but also helped me help my mixed race clients do the same. We all need something good to belong to right now. Relationships and spaces where we feel safe, held, seen, heard, and dignified. Thanks for being here, and let's get started with today's show. Howdy, friends. I don't know when or where or why I ever say howdy, but it just came out and it's kind of fun, so maybe I'll play with a little bit more. Welcome back to the show. I have a really great interview for you all today. And before we get into that interview, just wanted to pop in and say hello and a couple updates. I have been taking it easy this August, just like enjoying the constant music of the cicadas and the wind in the trees. I also had a little cold, and so even as I'm talking now, I'm over the cold, but my throat is still hurting. And so I've just been like giving myself some extra spaciousness. I'm kind of like dropping some of these interview episodes before I come back in the fall with more content, more like solo episodes for you all. So, hello, I miss you. Feel free to reach out to me on Instagram. And just wanted to let you know, I've been a little quiet on sort of the front facing side of mixed race belonging, but things have still been happening inside the mixed race belonging collective. And this morning, I just have to share this with you all. This morning, I woke up feeling so warm and gooey because yesterday, Sunday, you'll hear this episode Tuesday, but Sunday, we had a really amazing call inside the Mixed Race Belonging Collective. So this month, we've been exploring the somatic experience of feeling held in our relationships, by the land, by our ancestors. And yesterday, during this month's Practice and Connect space, I opened with an ancestral meditation practice. And then we had a group discussion about all the ways that ancestral connection work has felt hard for us as mixed race people, including some of us with additional identities. There are folks in the group who are adopted or are multi-generationally mixed or have white ancestors, and aren't really sure what to do with that. And I could just see how validating it was for everyone to hear that other people struggle when it comes to this idea of ancestral reconnection and ancestor work. But what was so cool, so special is that the conversation didn't stop at what was hard for us, but we also were able to get into what has helped us do this work. So, between me and some others in the group, there were a number of reframes that put things into perspective. There were resources that were offered. We talked about like taking it slow, starting small, and everyone left feeling like they actually had something that they could do to deepen their relationships with their ancestors. And this meeting is just the perfect example of why the Mixed Race Belonging Collective is so important, because these aren't the kind of conversations that you can always get into in spaces that aren't specifically for mixed race people, whether because they're not happening or you're insecure about bringing them up. But these are the kind of conversations that we have all the time in the Mixed Race Belonging Collective, in the live workshops, in the Practice and Connect space, in the discussion forums. So I just want you to know that if you want a dedicated space to talk all things mixed identity, belonging, ancestors, and more, you should join us inside the Mixed Race Belonging Collective. It's just $33 a month, and you can cancel and rejoin whenever you'd like. You're just a few clicks away from feeling more held, more seen, more validated, more empowered to live a connective life. as a mixed race person, and the link is in the show notes to get signed up. Now, as we transition into the interview today, I'm so excited to have you all listen to my conversation with Dr. Victoria Malaney-Brown, who's going to talk to us about multiracial consciousness and some other stuff. And really like the idea of connecting with our ancestors, of understanding our ancestors, their culture, their experiences, goes hand in hand with this idea of building multiracial consciousness for the purpose of um, building towards collective action. And so Dr. Malaney-Brown is going to school us on that and more. I can't wait to hear what you think about the episode. As always, let me know. And without any further ado, let's get started. Dr. Victoria Malaney-Brown is an author, leader, mother, and founder of VMB Coaching and Consulting. Currently, Dr. Malaney-Brown is the inaugural Director of Academic Integrity at Columbia University, where she directs an undergraduate program on integrity values and teaches about the hidden success curriculum needed in order to thrive in academia. She is the past president of the Critical Mixed Race Studies Association and is an expert on social justice education. Dr. Malaney-Brown has co-edited books, a monograph, has published 12 articles on DEI topics. She uses coaching techniques to help people to reach their full potential as their authentic selves. Dr. Malaney-Brown is a qualitative and mixed methods researcher who earned her master's and PhD from the University of Massachusetts Amherst in educational policy, research, and administration, and a Bachelor of Arts degree cum laude. Am I saying that right? Cum laude.
Got it. That's great.
In English, Spanish with minors in dance and Latin American studies from Skidmore College.
Yep.
Dr. Malaney-Brown also offers her voice to parent organizations, raising race-conscious children, nonprofit organizations, K-12 schools, and designs learning management and training curriculums for businesses, which is amazing.
Lots of
When
things.
I looked up your bio on your site, I was like, oh yeah, I'm reading all of this. This is great. You have done so many interesting things.
Yeah. I dabble a lot in different areas for sure.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, is there anything else you want to add just about like who you are
Yeah.
personally,
So
professionally?
yeah, I mean, personally, my racial mixed race background is came so it's taken me a while to like now talk about it in this way, but I consider myself Indo-Caribbean,
Mm-hmm.
and an American, but also Spanish, white, and African. So the Indo-Caribbean stems from my mother being Trinidadian. She grew up in Trinidad, and so she's an immigrant to the US, but her upbringing and the Indo part is connected to India. So when people sometimes initially read me, like my body and like what they think ethnically I could be, sometimes they get vibes of India, and other times it's like in the Latin diaspora, like
Yeah.
what they tend to get.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but my Irish heritage is the white part, and my dad is Irish. So
Mm-hmm.
Malaney, if you see one of my surnames is Malaney, it's a very Irish last name.
Yeah.
And that's my white family, like, and that's my dad's family. So
Yeah.
my mom comes from a very mixed background herself. And then my dad is Irish. And I think I don't really put a ton of value on the DNA tests, but he at one point did one of those tests, and Great Britain and some Scottish and other, European backgrounds are there. So,
Yeah.
uh, but that's my mixed background. But
Mm-hmm.
I, over the years, have figured out more and more about my ancestral heritage, which is why I use Indo-Caribbean first. It's also how I most identify closely to my
Mm-hmm.
Trinidadian culture. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I think that has a lot to do with my mom, my grandmother, the matriarchal like lineage in my family that has made me feel connected to my Caribbean roots, in particular my Trinidadian roots. Uh,
Yeah.
Despite growing up in the States and not having the Trinidadian accent, like I still, there could be a whole other conversation on that. That's a big part of my identity,
Yeah.
connecting to the Caribbean community. And I'm also a mom, and I have two young children. Their ages are 5 and 3 right now, a daughter and a son. And that's a big part of my identity now, which is why I've been interested in doing more work with families and seeing about how I can lend my understanding and expertise on mixed race, but make it accessible
Yeah.
to families. Because that's the stage of life I'm in now, is raising my kids and thinking through how can I help support families like myself that are now second generation mixed race Americans. So,
Yeah. Absolutely. I talk with a lot about with my clients about how our relationship to our multiracial identity can change throughout our life, and what we are feeling confident in or struggling with or just interested in general can also change. And I think parenting is a big milestone there that can kind of, start
right.
one of those shifts.
Exactly. So
Hmm.
I agree. I mean, it's changed a lot, but it's been such a joy at the same time, but also
Yeah.
made me think a lot about what could I was speaking to another person the other day who was part of the multiracial summit that Dr. Haley
Hmm.
um, contributed to last month. And
Hmm.
she was explaining that even for us as moms, what we didn't have growing up, we have so much more we can offer our children now, not only with language, with understanding, with ways to kind of consciously cultivate a positive framing of your mixed background, right? Your
Hmm.
multiracial background. And
Hmm.
that's what I am empowering my kids to understand, is to not um, be confused or not like when they encounter uh, microaggressions that are multiracial microaggressions,
Yeah.
I will know what to say, right? I,
Yeah.
it's a healing part of like this process now.
Hmm. 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 Yeah, I mean, you're so right that there's so much available now, for parents of mixed kids. And I'm
Mhm.
wondering, like in your own experience, back in, our day when there wasn't as much, was some of that like maybe part of your decision ultimately to really study and invest professionally in critical mixed
Yeah.
race studies? Yeah.
Definitely. I think it definitely stemmed from my childhood experiences. I grew up in South Florida. So
Hmm.
South Florida itself is very diverse. I mean, even the community that I grew up in, combinations of so many different cultures, Latin culture, Latinx cultures, as well as Haitian, African American, Caribbean, and everyone really else, you know. And growing up there, there was a lot of the constant questions of like, what are you, which is very
Hmm.
classic, micro
Hmm.
microaggression against, mixed people, which I'm sure you've talked a lot about this concept and topic
Hmm.
in your podcasts and information that's being shared with your followers. But I did not know how to address that when I was younger.
Yeah.
My mom, as an immigrant too, didn't know how to help me process what those questions meant.
Right.
She did her best. She would often say, like, just tell people you're human, because they were objectifying me, but I didn't know how to respond, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so, yeah, I think about that a lot. And it definitely didn't, it wasn't like the first thing that came to mind when I started to study research on race, but
Hmm.
it quickly shifted to that once I
Totally.
realized that there was a whole community of people professionally doing this work. Um, and so, yeah, it definitely played a huge role in it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm curious, so your mom grew up in Trinidad, is that right?
Yes.
And Trinidad and like, the Caribbean in general is such a diverse place full of like mixed identities.
Yes.
Do you know much about your mom's experience with that growing up? Was it just sort of like, yeah, everybody, is a little different, or were people, I mean, I imagine people are kind of often more connected to like their cultural communities.
Mhm.
What might have been some of the differences between her experience and yours?
Um, I mean, I definitely think that they had different racial terms down
Yeah.
there to account for different racial mixes and backgrounds. And one term that was historically used, but I don't believe is used as much now in present day, was the term Dogla.
Mm.
That term is a reference to being Indian and African mix.
Mhm. Mhm.
So she grew up with
Mhm.
people calling her that, and
Mhm.
family members of hers, like they're set, she was one of seven, so she had a very big family. That was a term that other Trinidadians would like call each other to account for their mixedness. Uh,
Mhm.
and so she is familiar with the word, but I don't know what she thinks of it now personally.
Yeah.
Uh, whether there's even a negative connotation to it for her, but um, as I have gotten to know different people who study like the racialization and the socialization of of terms like Dogla. Um, I can't remember her exact name, but I met her at the Critical Mixed Race Studies conference. She's a professor at Brooklyn College, and I could probably look it up maybe simultaneously while we're on this call. But she presented some work at the not the last conference, but the conference in Ohio.
Mhm.
And I was really impressed with her centering of Trinidadians in particular and the mixes within that
Yeah.
country. So I eagerly attended her session just to learn more about what she was sharing, and thought it was really valuable information. So,
Yeah. Yeah, right. I mean, there are other countries conceptualize race in different ways than we do, which I think is
mhm.
something that those of us like born and raised in America, you know, don't learn about until like sometimes later in life and if we're like seeking out that information.
Right.
Um, and so, yeah, so you had this experience growing up in Florida of like, what are you trying to figure out, how to answer that question? Fast forward, you start to study race. And I remember you were telling me that when you first um, proposed this idea of studying like mixed race identity to your like mentor, your advisor, tell us how that was received.
So the first person that I actually talked to about seriously studying multiracial identity, trying to do more research, was actually Dr. Charmaine Winjasinger.
Hmm.
And she wasn't necessarily a professor that I met. She was somebody who I met at a conference when I was 19, and that was 20 years ago now, for context. And I attended her session at the National Conference on Race and Ethnicity.
Hmm.
And it was that initial workshop that I attended where she was going over multiracial identity concepts, talking about like Poston's model of biracial identity from 1990. Like there were all these different worksheets and descriptions, and me like wide-eyed, like diving in, like, wow, there's
Hmm.
all of this theory and this research where people have been already trying to make meaning and make sense of biracial, multiracial, mixed people's experiences. And
Yeah.
she was professionally presenting. So I initially reached out to her right after I had finished my bachelor's degree, and serendipitously, we lived about 15 minutes away from each other. And I didn't know that when I
Mm.
reached out. So she happened to live close by. We met for coffee. And in that conversation, as I was 2 years out of my bachelor's degree, starting to think about what was next and realizing that I wanted to do something additional, like graduate school, but not sure what angle I would go, I had coffee with Charmaine, and she encouraged me to start looking at master's programs.
Hmm.
And she also then gave me other names of people that I could contact and call. From her initial coffee chat, turned into, why don't you call G. Reginald Daniel out at UC Santa Barbara? Reg, who is now rest in power, Reg. I mean, he was a fundamental person in the godfather, I would say, of like mixed race, multiracial identity work in the United
Mm,
States. And he's
mm,
done a lot of work in Brazil too, if you're familiar with his research and his contributions. I even realized the other day he had a forward and he wrote a book with about Barack Obama too,
mm.
President Barack Obama. But I remember I vividly remember a conversation with him where I was saying to him, can I study this? And what direction should I go? Because I was thinking at one point sociology, but I didn't have a sociology bachelor's degree, which was limiting for me to go apply to a PhD program.
Mm.
I did go one cycle of trying to do that and applied to UCSB after having that conversation with him, applied to several other schools, and I got rejections from all
Mm.
those PhD programs. So then the following year, I ended up applying to master's programs in higher education because I ended up working at my alma mater 3 years after I had graduated in diversity education. So
Mm.
through that work that was race centered around power, race, privilege, oppression, supporting student organizations that were culturally and racially based, identity based groups, I found like a home there for
Yeah.
me to then connect the dots between how do I support young people who are evolving and starting to think about their identities and empower them to make those connections on a college campus. So
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of the longer answer, but I try to keep it succinct too. That journey of calls of different people and their
Yeah.
receptive nature of just talking to me. And even
Yeah.
Reg, like believing in me, and he didn't even know me, but we just had a
Mhm.
long conversation on the phone and talking to me about, oh yes, you should definitely apply. And I believe that you can do this. And he was such a champion for folks that were interested in the mixed race experience to encourage them to go ahead and contribute. So
Yeah.
I ended up finding my pathway within higher education. Um, and it was within higher education that I continued my area of inquiry for mixed race, multiracial college students. That's kind of where I entered the space.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, it blows people's minds when I tell them that there is a whole field of research,
Yeah.
like in a very, diverse field of research, like as you're talking about, you know, folks who have studied just identity, folks who have studied, mixed folks within the context of higher education.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I saw you present most recently at the Critical Mixed Race Studies Conference in LA. I think were you at the Ohio one? I think I
I
may have also
was,
gone
yes.
to something that you presented there. But this past February, you were presenting on multiracial consciousness.
Mhm.
What is multiracial consciousness?
Yeah, so the concept of multiracial consciousness came from my dissertation work. And
Mm-hmm.
so I can read the definition if it's helpful for us to start there more specifically. And kind of give you some context. So the definition of multiracial consciousness is defined as a heightened level of self-awareness where a student self-reflects on their multiple racial identities, has the ability to describe how monoracism affects daily life experiences, and influences their decisions and choices to engage and disengage from ethnic, cultural, or racial justice causes. A
Mm-hmm.
lot in that definition,
Yeah.
but the parts of it that I can kind of tease out and help make more connections. Um, this study came from talking to 15 different multiracial collegians
Mm-hmm.
from various mixed race backgrounds. They all also defined their racialized terms, or like I've been using in this conversation with you, mixed race, multiracial, biracial. Like they claimed the terms that they use. Um, and from that, I did a narrative inquiry study, which is a format of really getting to know somebody's life histories
Mm-hmm.
through individual one-on-one conversations and then making meaning of those 15 different interviews to then answer, my general research question was trying to define this concept of what is multiracial consciousness and how do students engage and disengage in racial justice causes. Because at the time when I collected the data, there was a lot going on in the country with Black Lives Matter, with Standing
Yeah.
Rock, and other racial movements that I wanted to investigate not only the voice of understanding mixed race college students, but their reasonings for engaging or not in racial
Mhm.
work.
Mhm.
So a lot of this study talks about three different outcomes, three different pieces where using Paulo Freire, who is the Brazilian pedagogue who I have to pay homage to, his work on critical consciousness
Mhm.
was so central to me developing multiracial consciousness. It's really
Yeah.
very much intertwined with his original theory and how I started to notice in reading more about the research and the literature, there are different types of outcomes for mixed race students, people, individuals, where people feel very silenced
Mhm. Mhm.
and very unable to start to understand their vocal vocabulary around their sense of self and identity
Yeah.
personally, and they're not as educated or aware of the surroundings in their community that have actually silenced them from racially engaging in conversations about their mixed race background,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? So there's oppression in there with white supremacy, definitely in the mix, with monoracism, which is
Mhm.
that, singular belief in, a pure racial discrete categories that you have to be of one racial background. And if you're not, you are ostracized in a lot of ways. You feel very
Mhm.
othered, and there's five different categories of them, of course, that the original theory on monoracism that Kevin Odell and Mark Johnston wrote and coined the term and has been used so long and so in different contexts now. But I started to notice in the research in the original theory of Paulo Freire that there's a pattern here with
Yeah.
mixed racial people. So the first level is around massification, where you accept the silence and the passive nature of your community, wherever that may be. That
Mhm.
you may say to yourself and maybe to maybe some people around you that, yeah, I'm mixed, yeah, I'm biracial, but you don't actively claim that identity.
Mhm.
Kind of
Mhm.
happily in the monoracial or passing space. Whatever people project on you, that's what I am. Yep. Or they may not challenge that much. They're just passively there. And when it comes to racial justice, they're not the first group of people that are going to go run to the mic and say something. They're just
Yeah.
going to be they may be in the crowd, they may have an opinion, but they're not speaking up,
Mhm.
right? So I was really interested in that category at first. And when I originally started researching the topic, I got really into that. And then they were like, nope, that's a whole other like time for you that you can look into that. Not right now. You got to keep it
Mm.
moving, right?
Mhm.
So I continued on looking at the other levels, which was looking at recognizing oppression and racism. And that's when you start to understand that there's systems of power, privilege, and oppression that impact you day to day. And until you realize it and start to uncover that, you don't see it. And
Yeah.
then when you're educated about it, then you see it everywhere. Uh,
Right.
and I have examples if you want me to share. But I think it shows up in a lot of places in medical documents, in
Yeah.
surveys, in education systems still.
Yeah,
But when
feel free to share a couple examples. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like when I've heard about, and I think I may have mentioned this in some type of writing that I've done, that even when I applied for my marriage license in Florida, because I got married in Florida and I didn't get married in New York State, but they would not allow me to check multiple racial boxes
Mm.
for the marriage license. And I was
Mhm.
furious. Like, I was like, how are
Mhm.
we in
Mhm.
2017 or yeah, 2017, what am I saying? Um, Still making this monoracialized here? Like, why can't we
Yeah.
do this?
That's so painful.
So I had to like figure out how I wanted to respond to that.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've read Kathleen Odell Korgen's book about multiracial Americans and race policy. And that book is really great, where it talks
Mm,
about this same issue, but in the prison system too.
mm-hmm.
That folks who are incarcerated don't have the option, or in the criminal justice system, to identify themselves with multiple racial categories. It's
Mm,
very much racially singly like profiled, if you will, based
yeah.
on what they think you are.
Oh, interesting. Wow. I had no idea about that.
Hmm. So that shows up
Mm-hmm.
in that space. It also shows up in hospital settings, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And despite our current situation we're in, we still don't have great guidance, which you think we would just create guidance already. Like
Yeah.
the categories, folks, if you're creating a survey, do it this way. You know,
Yeah.
this is the reason why, blah, blah, blah. But there's still a lot of unawareness of how to set up stuff that really allows for people to feel seen in
Mm-hmm.
surveying. And it creates a bit more work on the end of the statistician or the person that's looking at the data to cross-reference and cross-tab all of those individual
Mm-hmm.
combining factors.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't make it easy. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so there's a bit more labor involved in that.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot there, and just even
Yeah.
that. But I'm digressing. So I'll bring us back to the last part. And then the last part of the definition was around taking action for racial justice, and that it's around what do you do, what do you say? And I think that it's not quite linear, but it's a fluid process of an individual figuring out their journey from being more passive and not vocal. And for me, I think that was definitely the ages where I was in elementary, middle, and high school, where I was grappling all the time about, I knew I was mixed, but I don't even think I really used that language
Mm-hmm.
very much. And it wasn't until college that I started having like more of a racial awakening, going to a small private liberal arts campus
Mm-hmm.
and starting to feel more of my identity, more in my body, if you will, and like questions about things. And I, then met Charmaine, and I met Dr. Christy Ford, who was a sociologist, and I started working with her as a research assistant throughout my sophomore, junior, and senior year. And she was a race-based sociologist and still does amazing work. She introduced me a lot to the readings and the concepts, because I would go and get books for her that she wanted from the library, or I'd find information. And then she started helping me learn how to do research. And she's a large component, and I owe a lot of debt to her and gratitude in helping me
Mm-hmm.
when I was in my early 20s and figuring this out. And so for the intergroup
Yeah.
dialogue, yeah.
Yeah. So what moves someone? So you're saying there's the second and third stage, which is one kind of more of that like awareness of power and oppression. And then
Mhm.
the third stage is sort of like actually showing up in
Yeah.
racial justice movement work. Like what moves someone from stage one to stage two?
So I think the other part that I want to add that makes more sense is what will move someone along there is moving through that individual journey of figuring
Mm-hmm.
out who I am,
Mm-hmm.
what that means for me, and
Mm-hmm.
how much do I need to know about my personal lived racialized experience from my ancestors or from my family.
Yeah.
How much do that I need to know to then become aware of my like target and agent identities. So target identities are like the oppressed groups that each one of us has,
Mm-hmm.
as you
Mm-hmm.
label all the things like woman, um, woman of color, mixed race, there's nationality there, there's language, there's gender, orientate, like sexual orientation, there's all these categories that all of us walk around and are a part of, right? So I
Yeah.
started to realize there's all these different like groupings and categories. So I think for me, it's a combination of all those things, right? A person starts to individually understand themselves and their social identities, then they're aware of who they are. and can move towards a what I would call the collective of starting to get together with other mixed and multiracial people to then take action in some way, whether
Hmm.
that's in a racial action justice-based group, whether that's creating community like what you're doing and helping people find each other. I consider that part of the collective consciousness.
Yeah.
So it's it's individual consciousness of each person doing their own self work and figuring out more of what they need to heal themselves and
Yeah.
understand the conditions and history and culture that they are embodying. And then from there, you're able to then start to connect and recognize how all of this connects to the larger systems of power and privilege and oppression. And then with that, then you can start targeting specific areas around, I have knowledge of this, I've experienced this, I have language now of how to discuss this, and let's build a collective. And so that's, I think, how I'm framing this is it's
Yeah.
how do you move towards this? Because I don't envision somebody who stays actively passive and massified. They don't actually know a lot about themselves.
Yeah. Exactly.
So they don't get the chance to
Hmm.
heal, dive in deep, start thinking about what they want to know. And even
Yeah.
if they don't know everything, because we know with this, with our community, there are lots of people who don't have positive family relations are related to racism, related to
Hmm.
all kinds of, you know, traumatic things that have happened to somebody in their lifespan. So it may not be that they can ask that relative or that person who's no longer in their life or physically in the world anymore about some of their curiosities or things that they need. But
Hmm.
I'm a big proponent of even if you don't have those people, how can you still connect to your community
Yeah.
in your own way? And how can you heal that for yourself, right? Um,
Totally. And it can be baby steps. So starting with going to one meeting or reading a book
mhm,
or listening to a
yeah,
podcast.
right. And so for
Yeah.
me, multiracial consciousness, while it started with students, I do believe it is more broad than
Yeah.
just the definition around a college student and what they experience. I do think it really can be taken and used in contexts that define the multiracial like experience in everyday life. Once you
Totally.
understand the definition, you can see it. You start to recognize it. Um,
Yeah. That feels, I mean, first of all, one of my early mentors, Dr. Nisha Hanif, I studied with her and traveled with her, and all of her like programs that she ran. She wasn't a research faculty, but a lecturer. Everything that we did with her was like Prairie was our Bible, right? So I also
mhm.
got like introduced to that very early, which I
Awesome.
think is part of what made me so excited about seeing your talk. And the way that I, over my career, of sort of that has stayed with me, along with what I now understand about like developmental psychology, as well as like
Mhm.
the process of like colonization and cultural severance, like that loss of lack of like knowing yourself,
Mhm.
like, and what happens when you start to know yourself, that just feels like so aligned. And I absolutely
Mhm.
think, yeah, that what you're saying is generalizable to like a larger
Yeah.
portion
I
of
think the
us.
word
Yeah.
as you're speaking, it made me think of the word. I at one point I remember reading something about cultural amnesia.
Yeah.
And the fact that like your body can remember in some way, but you don't remember as
Yeah.
like a person, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know, that sits with me and it definitely creates like a visceral reaction, I feel like to me, and just
Hmm.
saying that. But I do think it's important and if it's possible for every person to, ask their loved ones about their life and growing up and who they were connected to. And I've always been interested in like the family tree component, right? Like
Yeah.
like building that out and understanding who is who. And even from when I was younger, I always like to sit and listen to the adults like just talk about things. And I was always in there
Totally.
listening.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something a lot of our families don't do.
Hmm.
And that feels like such a perfect segue into hearing from you a bit more about your interest in supporting parents because, yeah, this can start at home of like fleshing out that family tree. I've seen that work and even like looking back generations described as like radical genealogy, which
Mm,
I really like.
yeah.
Yeah. So like how early do you think multiracial consciousness starts to develop?
Nobody's ever asked me that before.
I imagine
Um,
that there's like layers.
yeah, I mean, I think in knowing about the racial identity spectrum of infants, even to adolescents and adults, that I do think it starts from infancy, if I could
Yeah.
just say that pretty boldly. Because I do think like our parents are our first teachers in so many ways of sharing language, if that's something that you spoke. And I was only spoken to in English, but a lost language was Spanish in my family.
Mhm.
So for me, I wanted to learn Spanish partially for that reason, but also because I really love the language and the culture and the people and made
Mhm.
it part of like my schooling to do so, right? But I do think it starts from, babyhood and on, right? That you can start to embrace teaching your children about where they come from
Yeah.
and who's a part of their family. And children as young as 2 can even recognize skin color differences. They don't know how to verbalize it often, but can
Mhm.
and talk about their baby doll or people that they see and
Yeah.
start to name things, and there's been more research that has been done out there. I think about Dr. Annabelle Atkins' work or Dr. Sarah Gaither, who've done some amazing work with children in
Mhm.
particular, uh, starting to really amplify what do we know about what do we know? What do our youngest people out there? How do they conceptualize their race and racial identities? So I do think it can start as young as possible, and then it's just a
Yeah.
matter of empowering them to claim all of who they are, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I think there's some really great examples of families out there that are trying their best to bring languages back in to family, whether that's through dual language programs that maybe their children can get access to in their district, or um, whether that's teaching them cultural dances or food, embracing the difference in culture and food, or just family traditions to help them
Yeah.
understand more of who they are. So
Yeah. Yeah. There's so many places to start. Pick one, start small, keep going.
yeah, reading
Yeah.
books.
Yeah.
I'm working on an article for Dr. Kelly Jackson, who's out of Arizona State. She has a book coming out, a chaptered book called Mixed Mother Work, um,
Mm.
highlighting the voices of mixed race mothers and the parenting and caregiving and the journey of all of the evolving nature of mothers in any form, like those who are expecting, those who hope to be expecting, and the journey of just life. And then the caregiving aspect and elder care, like how the transition changes from your parents parenting you to then you almost parenting them and caring for
Yeah.
them and their
Yeah.
well-being. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what comes of that special project that Kelly was the former vice president of the Critical Mixed Race Studies Association many years ago now, but she's an amazing person and had
Mhm.
the privilege to be on, panels and conversations with her, and she's really got something cool. And I cannot wait to see that publication come out because I was able to see like
Yeah.
little abstracts from the different contributors, and I was like, this is going to be so good.
I
Uh,
bet. I can't wait for that either. I'm thinking of a few people who I know will be ready for that book.
yeah, and there's a great variety of contributors, so I think
Yeah.
it'll be really beautiful way of narrating stories from so many different perspectives.
Yeah. Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah, she's a social worker, so like her background is in that. So I think that's why it's so cool.
Yeah. I think I also went to one of her presentations in Ohio, which something I just always love to shout out. If you're mixed and you're not in academics, you can still come to the Critical Mixed Race Studies Conference and see some really cool, smart people speak. And also, I just love that the conference is also so welcoming of like more community-based kind of people
Yeah,
and presentations and everything. Like, it's cool to we're like a large but small community at the
yeah.
same time, like you
I think
start to hear the names around. So,
I think that's my favorite part about the conference is that for me, when I went to the first time was in Chicago when the founders of the Critical Mixed Race Conference, Laura Kina, Wei Ming Dariotis, and Camille Fojas were the trio that helped to start
hmm.
Critical Mixed Race Studies Conference and Association. I remember going for the first time and just feeling so empowered and in awe of this
Yeah,
created. It's so special. And that's the thing that I think is so unique about critical mixed race. It feels accessible without it being like too intimidating, I think.
yeah,
Sometimes academic conferences can be really intimidating. And
yeah.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't feel like it's that as intimidating of a space. I think it's very accessible
No,
for people to like join in how they'd like.
totally, totally. I agree 100%. It's worth it. I think the next one might be in Minneapolis. Is that right? You
Yes,
heard that?
that's what
Okay.
I've been told. Yes. I
Yeah.
don't know if that's new news or old, but I hope it's not
Hmm.
you know, raising a surprise. But my understanding is it's going to be in Minneapolis,
Yeah.
Minnesota. Yes.
Cool. What are some like gaps or opportunities you see that might come out of like critical mixed race studies eventually? Like what are some research areas that still need to be tapped into?
Hmm.
That's a big question, but
It's big. I mean, one area that when I was finishing my term as president of the Critical Mixed Race Studies Association, there was another interest area of developing more concerted effort to amplify the voices and the experiences of disabled, mixed
hmm.
race, multiracial people.
Hmm.
And being able to look at the intersections there relation to their experiences. And so like in different types of disabilities. So I do think that that is an area that is really needing to be contributed to. Um, and looking at it from multiple angles, it could be not just physical disabilities, but emotional or um, learning differences. There's all kinds
Yeah.
of of interesting ways that can dive in more to the lived experiences of everyday, multiracial people, but have different
Yeah.
dis I think that that's one area that isn't that I'm not aware of that is like I'm sure there's articles. Don't hear me wrong, folks, that
Yeah.
there's articles on this, but what I'm saying is I think that that's an area that I was hearing in my last part of my term that folks were interested in.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, there's so many intersections to
Yeah.
explore. Yeah.
That and the other area I'd say too is there's a parenting group that had just been started when I was also like finalizing efforts and transitioning over to Dr. Chandra Waring, who was
Hmm.
the past president of Critical Mixed Race Studies. And I definitely feel like there's a big connection between people wanting to find out more information related to the parenting aspect. And I shout out Dr. Jen Noble, who is amazing, does a great content, and also she's a clinical psychologist working with teens and families about all things mixed race, multiracial. Um,
Hmm.
and that's another area that I think uh, families don't realize they need those
Yeah.
resources, but they definitely do, I feel like,
Hmm.
if you get to talk. And so that's, it's a goal of mine that I think long term I'd like to figure out. I know we're in this era of not talking about race right now, where we were prior to the current administration, but um, and I do want to bring that back in different ways to support families and communities because I do think that they're very eager
Yeah.
to know how to support their child.
I agree. I agree. And we'll all be looking forward to that. Yeah.
So yeah, but those are some of the things that are on my mind.
hmm hmm Well, thanks for sharing. So, as we're coming to the end of our interview, it's time for my favorite segment, reading Raina-bow. And I always like to invite people to imagine a sparkly rainbow and like a do-do-do-do-do because I do my own sound effects around here.
Okay.
So what are you bringing to us? Sounds like you might have two book recommendations.
Yes. So the first book that I've been reading off and on is a book called The Awakened Family.
Mm,
And it's Dr. Shefali Tsabary, who has written about how to raise empowered, resilient, and conscious children. So
mm,
the concepts around how do you use your understanding as a parent to become really deeply aware of your like blind spots and the ways in
mm,
which you have grown up that your children actually shine a light on, you know, your weaknesses, if you will, or your areas
yeah.
that you don't realize you're then reteaching in some ways. And so I'm really interested in helping my children be able to just develop and be proud of all of who they are and understanding that I know over time they will identify very differently over the years as they grow and mature. But I just want to be consciously thinking about how to best support them and try to be as aware as possible. So
Yeah. Sounds like
I
a
do
great
like
recommendation.
yeah, I do like her work. And, they
Hmm
talk about judgment and mindfulness and having a mindful presence and, autonomy and just what's beyond your reaction and the
hmm
control piece where it's like, because I said so, but also trying to figure out boundaries in a healthy way. So there's that I
hmm
go back to and relook at, and it's right here on my desk. So that was one that I wanted to bring up.
So, where can people find you and what do you want to shout out? Anything in particular that you'd love to know about, folks to know about what you offer?
Sure. So people can find me on my website or on Instagram. My website is vmbcc.com. That's where you'll find like the hub of the different types of things that I do. You probably heard from my background, there's lots of things in there in the mix. But people can find me for all things related to college admission support if you're looking to go that route in higher education and want support in helping to find good fit colleges and universities. I offer that service. I've been specifically working with the Caribbean population, but I'm opening my services to anybody writ large who wants support to go to American universities. And I'm branching into Canadian schools as well. So that's one area. And then the other side is supporting families and mixed race individuals, community members who want to learn more and trying to develop. I'm working on some curriculum this summer that I'm hoping I can just speak it into existence because that'll make me like get my act together and do it. I'm working on creating a K-5 curriculum at first
Hmm.
to help families have activities to do to start framing conversations with their kids.
Mm.
And I have to shout out Farzana Nayani, who is
hmm
an amazing mentor as well to me. Her book, Raising Multiracial Children, I think it's called Tools for a Racialized World, or yeah, I think I got that right.
That sounds
But
about right. Yeah, I can
um,
consider it.
that book is great. I think that would be a primer to some of the work that I want to do because it
hmm
frames all of this in a very accessible way and gives individuals and families activities to do. But I want to narrow in on the K-5 area first and develop like a digital like download possibly, or it could be a book that they could purchase on demand or something and get sent to their
Yeah.
home. because I'm in that era of my life where I'm doing workbooks and activities with my children, and I think that it could be useful for other families. So they're my test cases, I guess, in figuring some of these things out.
Love that so much.
Yeah,
Great. Lots to look forward to.
yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I could talk to you for a lot longer about
Same here.
multiracial consciousness and everything. And thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for inviting me.